I'd been working parks long enough to know what to look for. Poachers, squatters, lost hikers, but nobody ever really trains you for stumbling into someone else's livelihood. Not the legal kind, anyway. It was late September, with heavy rain the night before, and the ground soft and slick with pine needles. I'd been tasked with running trail checks and a less traveled section of the park, an area mostly used by hunters before the permits dried up. Remote, overgrown, the kind of place nobody should be without a reason. 3 miles in, I smelled it. Sweet, heavy, and pungent. If you've ever smelled a marijuana grow even once, you never forget it. Except, this wasn't some college kid's stash. This was thick and sticky, saturating the air until it coated the back of my throat. I froze. Every nerve screamed to turn back, but my training said otherwise. Document, report, and leave without confrontation. The trick is, you don't always get to choose the confrontation part. I pushed a little deeper, careful to not snap branches. The smell grew stronger, and then I saw it. Rows of plants tucked under a green mesh canopy, disguised from above but thriving in the clearing. Dozens, maybe hundreds, irrigation tubing ran to a creek nearby. Fertilizer bags piled at the edge, covered with tarps. Whoever built this hadn't just squatted here for the weekend. This was a whole operation. And then I heard voices. Low and harsh. 2 men, maybe 3. I ducked behind a fallen log and steadied my breathing. They were close enough that I could make out words. Harvest before the frost. Move it quick. Keep watch. Too many rangers sniffing around. My heart thudded so loud I thought they'd hear it. Slowly, I reached for my radio. I squeezed the mic. Static. Dead. Too deep in the valley for signal. I knew I should leave. Take the GPS point, get out, and call it in once I have reception. But as I started to back away, my boots slid in the wet pine needles. The sound was small, but the voices stopped. Hey, you hear that? I didn't breathe. A branch cracked behind me, then another. Heavy boots in the undergrowth. I turned just enough to see him. Camo jacket, beard, rifle slung across his chest. He was scanning the trees, head cocked like a predator scenting prey. Don't move, I told myself. But then the barrel swung in my direction and our eyes locked. Ranger, he shouted. I bolted. Branches whipped my face, mud sucked at my boots, and lungs burned. I didn't look back until the gunshot cracked the air. Bark exploded from a tree inches from my head. Adrenaline took over. I zigzagged, ducked low, and scrambled over logs. Then another shot. Too close. My legs ached, but panic drove them harder. Another man stepped out from the brush. Shorter, lean, holding a shotgun. He grinned, teeth yellow. Well, look what wandered in. I skidded to a stop, slipping in the mud. Behind me, the first man crashed through the brush, gun raised. I was trapped. Easy, I said, raising my hands. My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. I don't care what you're doing out here. I just want to walk out. The bearded one snarled. You think we're that stupid? You saw it, you tell. Listen. I tried again, brain racing. I don't even have service out here. My radio's dead. Nobody knows where I am. I'm not here to screw with you. I was checking storm damage. That's it. For a moment, nobody spoke. Rain dripped from the pines, pattering on my hat. My arms ached from holding them up. Then the lean one stepped closer, shotgun still trained on my chest. He's right about one thing. Nobody knows he's here. The bearded one smirked, which means nobody will find him. My stomach dropped. They argued in low voices, half turned toward each other. I inched back, eyes darting for cover. A boulder, a downed log, anything. That's when the third man appeared. Younger, maybe early 30s, carrying a pistol awkwardly like he wasn't used to it. He looked nervous. His eyes flicked from me to the others. Boss said no shooting unless we had to, he muttered. The bearded one snapped. He saw everything. We don't get second chances. The younger guy hesitated, biting his lip. That hesitation was my only shot. I drove sideways into the brush. The shotgun roared, deafening, with pellets tearing bark where I'd been standing. I rolled, scrambled up, and ran. Gunfire cracked behind me, but branches shielded me enough to break their line of sight. I didn't stop running. Not when the valley sloped upward. Not when my legs screamed. Not even when I tripped and tore skin from my palms. Every breath was fire. Every sound behind me was death gaining ground. Finally, the trees thinned. I stumbled onto an old service road, collapsed to my knees, and fumbled for my radio. Static again. I forced myself up, running blind down the road until at last, a single blessed crackle. Station. This is hell. Shots fired. Illegal grow. 3 armed men. Northern Ridge. I need backup now. The reply was garbled, but it was enough. Somebody heard me. I kept running until I saw headlights. Sheriff's deputies, rifles out, yelling for me to get down. Relief washed through me so hard, my knees buckled. I dropped face first into the gravel and let them take over. The grow site was raided the next morning. Empty. Plants hacked down, tents burned. Irrigation pipes ripped up. Whoever those men were, they cleared it out overnight. No arrests, no names, just vanished. All that remained was the smell, still clinging to the valley, sweet and heavy, and the memory of a shotgun blast close enough to feel in my chest. That was 6 years ago. I still patrol the back country, but every time I smell that sweetness, I freeze, because now I know it doesn't mean a good time. It means men with guns and the knowledge that your badge isn't armor. Out there, you're just another body in the woods. I work through winter rotation at a state park up north in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Winter is quiet for visitors and busy for us. Frozen pipes, downed limbs after wind, trail closures, paperwork that piled up all summer, the usual. Our crew usually consists of 2 rangers on days and 1 on swing, 1 on nights if there's a storm. That week I was on days. I've been sleeping fine, getting up early to meet the plows at the main gate and make sure the campground loop stayed barricaded. The day this happened, it had snowed overnight. Lake effect bands came through after midnight and were tapering off by sunrise. At 7 a.m., I checked the road log and signed out a truck. The temperature at the ranger station thermometer was 18 degrees Fahrenheit with wind around 10 miles per hour, out of the northwest and intermittent flurries. Visibility was fair, the kind of day where you can work as long as you keep moving. Dispatch had 1 call waiting from a hiker the night before. He parked at the Red Pine Loop trailhead and turned around early because he thought he heard a coyote pack close by. He'd been jumpy but polite, and he promised he wasn't going to back out until morning. It wasn't anything, but put the Red Pine Loop on my list for a quick look. I figured I'd swing by after the campground check. I loaded my pack the same way I always do for winter patrol. Map, radio, spare battery, Garmin inReach, first aid kit, trauma kit, small, 2 space blankets, extra gloves, headlamp, hand warmers, flagging tape, tape measure, notebook, energy bars, and thermos of coffee. I keep snowshoes in the truck but usually try boots first if the snow isn't too deep. The department issues micro spikes and I had those on. The main road into the park was clear thanks to county plows. No tracks on our service roads besides the plow and a few deer. I drove past the frozen lake turnout. Ice fishers wouldn't risk it for another week or 2, and turned into the campground loops just to confirm the barricades had held. Everything looked normal. Ice-crusted picnic tables, snow drifted around the bathroom building, and a set of rabbit prints weaving under Site 12's fire ring. I took a picture of a limb leaning on the roof of the vault toilet to add to the work order list. At 8:10, I pulled into the Red Pine Trailhead lot. It's a small gravel lot with 1 bear-proof trash can and a bulletin board with the usual rules. There were no vehicles. The surface of the lot was a mix of plow berm and fresh powder. I parked along the edge, set my hazard lights, and stepped out. I always look at the ground first before I look anywhere else. Footprints are the story you can read without anyone arguing, at least for a little while before the wind erases the lines. I saw the outline of a single set of human tracks crossing the lot from the bulletin board toward the trail entrance. The snow on the lot was patchy from the plow, so it took me a second to see what felt wrong. They were barefoot, not boots with a tread that looked smooth, not moccasins, not the shallow outline of a rubber sole where fresh snow filled in the detail. I could see toes. The impression was clean, as if the person had stepped there within the hour. The big toe was splayed slightly, the heel was defined. The steps were short and close together, not the stride of someone running. The track line went straight to the Red Pine Loop entrance and onto the trail. I stood there for too long. My brain was trying to make it something reasonable. People do strange things in the woods, and hypothermia is a real thing. We've had paradoxical undressing at least twice in my 6 winters on staff. But barefoot from the lot into the woods on a day like this is an emergency, not a curiosity. If he or she had gone in the last hour, there was a chance. I checked my watch. It was a little after 8 in the morning. I got on the radio and told dispatch I was at the Red Pine Trailhead, following a single set of bare footprints. No vehicle in the lot. I asked them to put the county search and rescue on standby just in case. Dispatch acknowledged and told me to check in every 15 minutes. I added the snowshoes to my pack without putting them on. I didn't want to stamp out the evidence with a big web of aluminum frames. Not yet. I put a strip of flagging tape on the trailhead post with the time for anyone coming in behind me. I took a picture of the first few prints with my phone, clicking through different angles like it mattered. Then I started down the trail. The red pine loop is a lollipop. A half-mile stem, then a 2-mile loop that returns to the stem. The stream goes through mixed hardwoods, mostly maple and beech. Canopy breaks are small. Snow depth on the trail was maybe 6 inches where the wind hadn't scoured. The bare footprints were clear. Each one bit into the powder and compressed the base layer. In a few spots, I could see where the skin had pulled up grains. The toes had spread as if the person was gripping. The stride was consistent and light. The print stayed centered on the trail at first, as if the person knew where they were going or just defaulted to the obvious corridor. I kept my pace measured. I didn't want to trample a sign or blow past something important. I scanned the trees constantly. I called out twice. "Ranger, if you can hear me, call back." My voice died a little in the snow. No reply. Crow moved between treetops and made a flat croak. I checked my watch every few minutes, even when I didn't need to. At about 8:30, I stopped and touched one of the prints. The edges were still crisp. These had to be recent. I called it in again. Past the half-mile marker. Prints fresh, no return tracks, no other human sign. The print started to drift toward the side of the trail. There's a section where the red pine crosses a shallow draw, and you can hear water running under ice if you stop and listen. The prints cut off the packed corridor and stepped into the draw, then up the opposite bank, back onto the trail. No hesitation at the icy patch. Bare skin had touched cold ice and gone on. Every time I said "they" in my head, I felt more pressure. They implied living. Living meant I was a racing clock. I picked up my pace. The prints never showed the heels slipping or the toes dragging. No blood, no obvious signs of struggle or running, just steady bare steps. At about 8:45, I hit the loop junction. The tracks went right. I snapped another photo, marked the junction with tape, and followed. The right side of the loop climbs slightly and follows the ridge for a half-mile before turning north through the red pines that give the loop its name. The wind is calmer there because the pines break it. Snow under them is thinner from the canopy. I thought if the person had made it that far, I'd find them tucked under bows, maybe confused, maybe asleep. I called out again. "Ranger, if you can hear me, answer." Silence, except for a woodpecker tapping somewhere to my left. I kept going. By 9 o'clock, I radioed dispatch again. I was on the ridge section, still following a single barefoot track. No return prints, no visual. They told me a deputy was staging at the trailhead and search and rescue was on standby. The trail turned into the red pines. The world went quiet the way it does under conifers in the winter. My boots stopped squeaking and started thumping. The snow here was only 3 inches deep. The prints lost some crispness under the needles, but they were still distinct. Toes, ball, heel. I could see where some needles had stuck to the skin and been carried forward, then dropped. A quarter-mile later, the prints moved off the trail again and threaded between trees in a line that was too straight for chance. Whoever it was knew how to walk through a forest without wasting motion. The line cut around the wind throw, passed between 2 young pines without brushing the branches, and returned to the trail. No sign of clothing or gear along the route. No socks, no shirt, no discarded hat. It was paradoxical undressing. I expected to find something. At 9:12, I stepped into a small opening where the wind had scoured the snow thinner. The prints entered the opening and continued for 10 feet and then stopped. Not faded, not blown over, just stopped. I don't mean they were hard to see, I mean there were no more prints beyond that point. The snow beyond was untouched. No disturbance on the surface. No sign of scraping. No sign of a leap. The last footprint had the toe splayed as if gripping, then nothing. I did a grid search, 10 yards out in every direction. Nothing. No broken branches. No drag marks. No shallow depressions. Just one last footprint in an open patch of snow. I called it in. The subject's prints terminated abruptly on the east side of the loop, with no continuation and no return. I asked for SAR to be activated and the deputy to come in behind me. I stayed on the scene another 20 minutes, expanding the grid. Found deer beds, rabbit trails, and nothing human. Then I heard something. Not a branch cracking, not a voice, More like the suction noise you hear when you pull out a boot from slush. That sticky unlatch. Except it was dry snow. It came from the direction I'd walked in. I scanned. Nothing. My stomach dropped. I flagged the last print more visibly and started back toward the trailhead. 3 minutes into the walk back, I saw it. Next to my own boot prints, where the snow had been smooth before, there was now a second line of barefoot prints. The same toes, the same splay, a steady stride, perfectly parallel to mine. They hadn't been there when I walked in. I radioed dispatch immediately. I now had a second set of bare footprints shadowing mine on the way out. Could they confirm the deputy hadn't come in yet? They confirmed. He was still at the trailhead putting on snowshoes, boots on, not barefoot. I kept moving. Every bend in the trail, I expected to see someone. The prints mirrored mine. At one point, where I stepped off the trail for a second, the barefoot prints stepped off at the exact same spot, then rejoined mine. That detail rattled me more than anything. It meant deliberate tracking, not random wandering. At the shallow draw, where I'd crossed carefully on ice, the barefoot prints stepped directly into my boot marks. Exactly, like they didn't want to risk the ice anywhere else. By the time I reached the deputy, I was wound tight. We walked back together, both of us watching the trees. The second line of prints continued alongside mine all the way into the trailhead opening, then angled closer and stopped. The last print was right at the edge of the plowed gravel, a clean barefoot impression and nothing beyond it. We swept the lot. Nothing. Search and rescue came in and we searched the termination point again with more people. Probed the snow, checked the trees, swept the loop. Nothing. No clothing, no body, no other sign. We never found anyone. That was 2 winters ago. I've been out there dozens of times since. In daylight, the red pine loop looks normal. Just another trail. But I can still picture that last print at the edge of the lot. Somebody had walked right up to the line and decided not to step out. I don't have an ending for this. Nobody turned up in thaw. No hiker claimed it. No missing persons fit. All I have are photos of the bare footprints in the snow and a story I can't shake. Hi everyone. This story comes from one of my friends who used to be a ranger at the national park I work at, and not from my personal experience. I've asked him to tell me the scariest experience at the job, and it just so happened to be his last. For immersion's sake, I'll tell it from the first person point of view. My normal shifts were during the day, 9 to 5 like most people, but on that day, we were short-handed on the night shift staff, because the last person who worked during those hours had just quit. We had lately had a whole lot of people quitting the night shift, so that meant I had to cover. Weirdly enough, I had never had to work the graveyard shift before then, and I was actually excited for it. I had brought some coffee and 5-hour energy with me because the hours ran 10 to 5, and there was no way I'd make it that far naturally. I got to my tower right before 10, when it was already pitch black and the cold July night had fully set in. The tower was fairly tall, with several flights of stairs leading up to the top. The whole thing was mostly surrounded by thick forest, except for the trail I came in from, and a murky pond that was just to the right of one of the tower's legs. The pond itself was covered in those little frog pads and had algae floating around over the surface. It was actually quite big for a natural lagoon. I climbed up and all I could hear were the non-stop sounds of crickets, frogs, and the occasional owl. When I hit the top, I fumbled with my keys until I finally found the right one and walked right on in. The one room was small and square-shaped. 3 of the walls were mostly glass, and the other one was opaque and had the door I just came in. The roof went up like a pyramid for a short length until it peaked, and it was all made of wood. To my left was a nicely made bed and a nightstand with a lamp and a flashlight on top. Not like I'd be using the bed though. On the wall next to that was my CB radio and communications stand, which every one of those towers had. Next to that sat my refrigerator and microwave, which were part of a small kitchen that extended to the other wall as well. Inside the kitchen on the right wall were several cabinets, some small ones that held snacks and some canned foods, and another set of giant cabinets that I couldn't open, which likely had vacuums and other cleaning supplies that were above my pay grade. Roomy. I went over to the communications stand and did my standard check to make sure everything was properly working. I called into the ranger station's channel and said, "Well, Donnie, it looks like it's just you and me tonight." Donnie didn't say anything back, so I figured he was just taking a shit. I went and grabbed the flashlight on the stand and reached into one of its drawers, pulling out a set of binoculars from it. A went back out into the balcony and checked to make sure there were no fire hazards or any other kind of dangerous things over there. Once I checked that box off my to-do list, I headed back inside and pulled out the chair from the communications stand and put it by one of the glass walls and grabbed a granola bar from one of the kitchen cabinets to munch on. I put the binoculars up to my eyes and looked over the surrounding forest. It didn't seem like any animals were on and about, and no birds were in the sky either. I skimmed over a couple of clearings to make sure that no teenagers were off camping illegally. Then I went and peeked over at a far ridge where I saw a snowman standing alone in a gap of the trees. Wait, it was July. I peeked again to see if it wasn't a snowman, but some kid in a shitty ghost costume. It looked like the ones from Charlie Brown, with the big black holes for eyes that looked more like they were colored black than actual holes. The kid was standing still and staring right in my direction, unmoving. I couldn't see the kid's parents anywhere, and by now it was rolling up on 11. That meant something was up. I broke contact on the kid and walked to the radio, calling into the station. "Donnie, are you off the shitter yet? Hey, I barely made it out, but I'm here." I chuckled. Donnie was always good for a laugh. There's some kid with a blanket walking around the southeast sector, and they look alone. A blanket? What the hell are you talking about? It's like a ghost costume. It's got the black holes for eyes and stuff. You mean like the Charlie Brown costume? Can you check it out? Yeah, I'll go and see what's up. I'll call in on the walkie-talkie to tell you what I see. Roger that. I turned off the radio and crossed over to the nightstand drawer to grab the walkie-talkie. Once I had it, I sat back down on the chair and put the binoculars to my eyes, zooming in to where the kid was. The ridge was empty with no kid in sight, which I knew would make this 1,000 times harder. I pulled up the antenna on the walkie-talkie and dialed to the right channel. "Donnie, you hear me?" "Yep, loud and clear. I'm getting close to the sector. I'm heading up to a ridge for a vantage point." "Perfect. That's where I saw the kid, but they've moved on since then." "Well, I'll just check around to see if I can find anything." I watched as Donnie came over the ridge, waving his flashlight around in the dark until he looked towards the tower and shrugged. "Nothing over here." "Damn. Hopefully he turns up again. Until then, I'll just notify the police and check with any missing reports." "Alright, I'll go back to..." Donnie's voice cut out, and I saw his flashlight turn off in the distance. The small lit up spot where he stood was swallowed in darkness. "Donnie, you there? Donnie?" I heard no response, and I rushed outside the door and around the corner to where I saw him, yelling his name, only to hear my voice echo into the woods. And that's when it hit me. There wasn't a single other sound in that entire forest. The crickets and frogs had stopped chirping. The wind didn't rustle through the leaves. Everything was completely still. I could hear my heartbeat throbbing in my ears and nothing else. I moved my flashlight around the woods in some futile attempt to find him. I got into that state of mind where I got so scared my throat closed up, and if I moved, I felt like something very bad was going to happen. I had to do something now. I turned around, and as I did, I glanced at the stairs below me. At the bottom stood a skinny, horrifically angled woman. She was tall, dripping with water, with black hair, and dark murky blue skin that stretched across her bent and broken bones. Her gray dress was shredded, and her black shoes were muddy and wet. And her face, her eyes were milky white, and her mouth hung wide open like a snake, like her jaw had been grossly broken. She let out a blood-curdling and ear-piercing scream of agony and began to shuffle up the stairs so fast that I snapped out of my fear lock and I ran the heck back inside, slamming and locking the door behind me. There was no way she could run that fast, even if all of her bones weren't broken in the wrong directions. I ran back to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. Then I pulled out the walkie-talkie, screaming into it. "Is anyone there? Donnie, where the heck are you? Someone answer me, damn it." Then I heard the creaking of a door. I slowly turned, and I froze when I saw what was there. The door was still there, locked and shut, and had been completely undisturbed. What scared me was the once locked giant cabinet that now stood open, with a kid dressed like a Charlie Brown ghost standing just in front of it. I stood there, unmoving, until I heard a little shit giggle. I recognized that giggle. No way. I pulled off the sheet to see one of Donnie's kids, Marvin, sporting a smirk and a walkie-talkie. "Dad, Joey, I got him." Ha, pissed his pants just like I said he would, right? He and his other son laughed from the other end of the walkie. I was mad but glad I wasn't about to get murdered in a damn wooden tower. I grabbed his walkie and shot back. "Pissed me off is what you did, you jerks. I hope you're happy. Hearing you scream like a little girl sure did make me happy, alright. Yeah, screw you too. That wasn't even me, that was your stupid zombie chick. Who was that? Your wife? My what? Does the ghost look like a zombie from that far away? You said yourself, it looked like Charlie. Not the ghost, dummy. The woman on the stairs. She screamed and ran up them so that she could scare me into the tower. Heck, she must be an Olympic runner. Dean, I didn't put any woman on the stairs. Upon hearing that, he would have had the night shift for the next couple of weeks until they found a replacement. My friend quit and vowed never to return to that park. To this day, he swears that either Donnie never told him about that park being a prank or that he saw something entirely unrelated. I've begun to question my own participation in the night shifts and considered myself lucky that the few times I've been on it, I had been stationed at the north and eastern sectors. I don't remember all of it clearly. A head injury will do that. The doctors told me the memory gaps were normal, that pieces might come back in dreams or never at all. But I'll write what I can. Maybe if I lay it out, it'll make sense. Maybe somebody else won't brush it off the way I did. My name's Eric. I was posted to a ranger cabin in the northern unit last fall, covering weekend nights alone. It wasn't anything unusual. Check the service roads, make sure hunters weren't creeping into closed areas, and keep the radio alive. I'd done the shift before. It was quiet work. Just me, the stove, and the hiss of the wind through the trees. 2 days in, I met them. 4 boys. Maybe 20, maybe younger. They were camped near the old Fire Road trailhead, just inside the park boundary. They all wore mismatched camo jackets, surplus gear, and knives clipped to their belts. Like they wanted me to notice. They gave 3 names when I asked. Kyle, Tanner, and Jake, and the 4th one just smirked when I pressed. I wrote question mark in my notebook where his name should have gone. They laughed about that, like it was an inside joke I didn't get. Off-season campers, huh? I asked. They nodded. Roughing it, one of them said, grinning wide. I told them to be careful with fires, and they promised they would. They didn't seem drunk or stoned, just wired with that mean kind of energy that doesn't sit right. I chalked it up to kids playing soldier in the woods. That night, just after midnight, I heard it. A knock on the side window of the cabin. Not the door, the window by my cot. I froze with my boots halfway off, listening. When I finally got the flashlight on, the frost outside was marked with tracks. I wrote it down in my log like a joke. Camp boys playing games. The next night, there was another knock. This time on the door, 3 times. When I opened it, the porch was empty, except for a pile of rocks stacked into a crude figure. Arms, legs, and head. The proportions were wrong, but it was enough to send a chill through me. The 3rd night, I found a rabbit hanging by its legs from the porch beam. Throat cut, frozen stiff in the night air. I radioed it in. My supervisor laughed. Teenagers, he said. Just scare them off. So I decided to play along. I yelled out into the trees. Good one, boys. Try harder next time. I even left a Snickers bar on the porch with a note. For the winners of hide and seek. The next morning, the bar was gone. In its place was a folded scrap of paper. You like games. Don't quit. I laughed because what else could I do? That was my mistake. After that, the games escalated. Knocks came every night, later and louder. Sometimes I'd hear jiggling just inside the tree line. My radio started cutting out around midnight, spitting only static until dawn. I'd wake to find things moved inside the cabin. Certain things set on the wrong shelf. The lamp turned slightly, the logbook missing a page. I kept telling myself it was sleep deprivation, but deep down I knew. They had been inside while I slept. Night it all turned, I was sick. A headache throbbed behind my eyes, and my stomach turned sour every time I stood up. I figured it was a flu, and I tried to sweat it out by the stove. Around 11:30, the first knock hit the door. This one wasn't playful. It rattled the frame and shook the hinges. I grabbed the radio. Nothing but static. Then the window shattered. 3 figures came through at once, hoods pulled low, boots crunching glass. One had a bat, another carried a crowbar. The last held a hunting knife with the edge catching firelight. I stumbled up from the cot, shouting, "Stop! Ranger!" But the word broke apart in my throat. The bat swung and hit me right across my ribs. I dropped, gasping, and the crowbar cracked the back of my skull. I remember the floor rushing up, boots hammering into my chest, my legs in my face. I remember blood filling my mouth until I choked on it, and I remember someone crouching close. his breath hot against my ear, whispering like he wanted only me to hear. Not a game anymore. Everything after is fragments. A ceiling light too bright to look at, the beep of machines in a steady rhythm. My sister's voice was breaking as she said, 3 weeks, Eric. You were gone 3 weeks. A sheriff leaning in, asking me if I remembered faces. I tried. I told him about the camp boys, names they gave me. Kyle, Tanner, and Jake. And the one who wouldn't say, but the sheriff shook his head. Said there were no records of anyone camping in that section. No permits, no IDs, no reports of trespassers. They still don't know who it was. Now, months later, I'm still not right. My ribs ache when I breathe. Words slip from my memory like water through a sieve. I wake up at 3 a.m. sweating, convinced somebody is outside the window waiting. I think about that note they left. We like games, and I keep wondering if they're finished playing. I've been a national park ranger for close to 2 decades. Protocols have changed a lot in that time. I write this just to try to keep people safe for the next time you venture to the big outdoors. Let me tell you about the last park I worked at. I can't be too specific about the location for my job's sake. Anyway, we had clusters of campsites that were rotated annually. The idea was to prevent one group from getting overused and worn down, and let nature regrow a little bit. The winter had just passed, and our big summer season was a few months away. I'm sent out to check the suitability of the campsites to decide which ones need time to recover, and which ones we can open up. Winters here are cold. Not too many people camp during the winter, aside from rugged masochists and Boy Scout troops led by people who believe they are rugged masochists. I didn't expect to find much out of the ordinary. The first site was clear and ready to go. As I'm trekking to the next site, I see what looks like some debris and junk down a ways in a river valley. Looks like some jackasses set up an unauthorized camp down there. Usually when that happens, they leave garbage and smoldering fires. This is going to be a pain to clear up. I approach, seeing the telltale wreckage of what must have been one hell of a party. Shit scattered everywhere. The skeletons of tents still raised up, and blood. I stop, and time stops with me. Pools of blood are spread out along the ground, next to signs of something heavy being dragged into the brush. I pull my radio off my belt and pause. I then pull my Glock 22 out of my holster and rack one round. I'm a certified law enforcement officer, but I haven't had to use my gun in a long time. I quickly look around for any movement, then get on my radio and call in for backup. While I wait, I listen. Silence. Silence in nature isn't good. Prey go quiet when they sense a predator. I hope all the birds are being still on my account. I edge forward slowly, looking for anyone or anything. A shredded plastic cooler. A tent that has been annihilated, with more blood splashed on the walls and inside. People died here. I know it. You can't lose that much blood and just walk off. But no people. Shreds of clothes and a little viscera drawing of all the damn flies here, but no people. I've seen bears rummage through camps and destroy anything that looked edible. There are wild hogs here that cut trails through the deep brush and are even more dangerous than the bears. But this isn't either of them. The devastation here, it's just too much. Finally, backup arrives and I'm sent to report to HQ. They even brought medics out here. I don't know why. There's no one here to save. One of the new recruits vomits at the scene. I'm glad to get the hell out of here. I get back and HQ is abuzz. Only 4 people work here, but calls are ringing, printers are printing, and the air feels electrified. The manager sees me and signals me to his office. He's pale, ashen looking, with bloodshot eyes. I sit down by his desk and he goes to the door and locks it. I've never seen him lock that door. He asks me what I saw. I tell him, uninterrupted. He looks even paler afterward, and his hands tremble a bit. There's a very long pause, and I expect more questions. He doesn't ask any. I leave, then hear the door lock behind me. After a few minutes, I hear him call somebody up, and a long, low conversation ensues. I never see him again. Word comes down from on high. We're assigned a new manager, one who excels what he calls crisis. His first order of business, a controlled burn of the unauthorized camp and the sites closest to it. I'm not arguing. I watch the smoke rise in the distance and pray that's the end of it. New orders relocate the existing campsites closer to HQ. Before we do that, we stake out a few trail cameras at the new locations just to make sure it's not in the middle of a nesting ground. Put up a few cameras pointed at the hog trails through the brush for good measure. A couple days pass and we go out to collect the footage. The new manager takes it all and starts studying it in his office. A couple hours into reviewing, he freaks out, starts screaming and yelling, gets on the phone calling off the line, spitting more obscenities. He spends the rest of the day and that night in the office, calling up specialists and planners. The next morning, I show up for a meeting. The manager doesn't look like he slept. Massive changes are afoot. He lays out our new plans, including massively bright lampposts circling the park border as well as floodlights around the ranger station. Campsites need to be moved even closer in. Clear lines of sight from the light, if possible. I butt in, telling him that defeats the point of going camping if you're going on a short walk through the grass and then setting up so close you can see the parking lot. He tells me to shut up, that it's just the start. The park now closes at sundown sharp. Also, we're now required to have a long gun on our person at all times. Now, it isn't uncommon for rangers to carry an AR-15 or a Remington 870 shotgun when going out deep in the woods. There are wild and rabid animals out there. The real concern is massive pot growers. These aren't your chill neighbors who hide a few plants behind the tomatoes. They run the spectrum from large-scale suppliers who like their privacy and dislike law enforcement to anti-government crazies who think we have no right over them, the true patriots. Both groups have a few common points. They tend to be well armed, they do not like lawmen, and they won't shy away from taking a pot shot at some dumb poor ranger who finds himself in their fields. Keep in mind, Elliot Ness, Mr. I Fought Al Capone in 1, got scared off busting up Appalachian moonshiners because they constantly sniped at him in the foothills, and they shoot to kill. Those are the reasons we keep the big guns around, not routine patrols. I drew this short straw and got to overnight shift. The manager tells me more changes to protocol will be listed when I return. Overnights used to be easy. Monitor the radios, burst up the parties if needed, check for poachers if they're operating nearby, and make sure the forest doesn't burn down. I clock in and, per instructions, go to the gun cage. My, things have changed. Our shotguns have new rifled barrels, so they can handle the solid slugs we've been issued. That's the kind of firepower you want to take down a charging bear. The AR-15s have been stepped up too. The old 15-round magazines have been replaced by 30-round ones. Someone even snuck us in hollow point rounds. Makes no damn sense. Shooting in the woods, you need full metal jacket ammo so the rounds don't go wild when they touch a twig. Hollow points just exist to do more tissue damage. This is ridiculous. This is overkill. We're not a war zone. We don't need this firepower. Next to the radio, there are new instructions. Now, we're not allowed to directly respond to emergency calls. We can reply and figure out what the issue is, and then we report to a new phone number I don't recognize. Time passes slowly tonight. I'm not even allowed to leave the building until sunup. A few uneventful nights pass. The new floodlights and lampposts are frying my eyes. It's so bright out there a blind man could see. A week later, some kids roll into the lot. They grab their backpacks and start hiking up the ridge. I know what they're up to. No one has booked a campsite that night. Cheap young ones going on a camp that will be a raging party. I wait for the sun to go down, confirming they're not out for a day hike. I call my manager to report. He instructs me to call the new number, and I report up to them now. A curt voice answers the phone. He asks about my park, then pauses. He asks about the issue. Bunch of kids on an unauthorized site. Do I go break it up? I can see their campfire out on the ridge right now. No, do not leave the building. Do not attempt communication. That is all. Report if there are any developments. Right after daybreak, the manager rides up. It's really early. Have you seen them? Did they leave? No, the car's still there. Let them rest. They're probably all hungover. He curses nonstop. He then goes inside to make a call. I'm outside looking up the ridge when he exits the station. One AR-15 in his hands, another one strapped across his back, Glock on his hip. He marches single-mindedly towards his car. I try to ask him what the heck he's doing, but he isn't listening or responding. He takes a jerry can of gasoline from his car and marches up the ridge. I yell after him to no reply. I consider following him, but that doesn't seem like a good idea. I go back inside and call the number. The same curt voice. The same direct questions. Yeah, the manager went up to that campsite, armed to the teeth and carrying gasoline. What the heck do I do? Stay there. Do not interfere. Backup is inbound. report if there are any developments. About the same time, I start to see smoke wafting off the bridge. 2 vans ride into the lot at a screaming speed. A dozen men, heavily armed and armored, exit quickly. I go out to check. Who are you guys? What's going on? The men are all lined up with that impeccable military precision. One of them, a commander I assume, exits the vehicle last. He says, "Which direction did he go?" "I mean, he's up there." I point at the increasing smoke. The men fan out and start jogging up the ridge. I hear rifles cocking as they leave. I try to shout after them, but no response. I look at the vans they came in. Large, nondescript. They just say DOI response team on the side. Half an hour later they return, dragging the manager with them. He is bound in zip ties. He screams, "I did what needed to be done. Trust me, it's worse than they thought. We can't stop this. Burn it all." They throw him in the back and sedate him. The commander approaches me. My neck hairs bristle in cold fear. "I need to see the office. All computers and anything with a hard drive are coming with me." He mentioned videotapes. I need those too. I unlock the doors and they ransack the place. Everything gets taken. Printed reports from the last few years disappear into those vans. The videotapes get bagged up and held by the commander himself. He studies the gun cage. "Cute. You're out of your league," he scoffs. Finally, they found everything they looked for, the commander tells me. "Call the number. Tell him it's contained. You need a new superior. Also, don't talk about this to anyone." They leave, and just on cue, the fire brigade and a few new vans show up. The fire is contained, the new reports say. Rumors of missing campers are unsubstantiated at this time. Still, the rumors alone are enough to scare off the season's campers. The quick change-up of managers is chalked up to bureaucracy. The press dies down after a week or two. The new manager is very good at dealing with them. Thankfully, with no new campers and our now even shorter open hours, we can get more work done around here. Rebuilding the station took some time, and we just set up the new campsites. They're practically spitting distance from the station. Nothing dramatic happens for a few days. Then on a whim, the manager tells us to set up some cameras around the station and the campsites. There's usually so much human activity around here. All you see are some raccoons. Maybe they're rare hungry bear, but we humor him and set them all up around. A couple of days pass and we collect the footage. I play poker with one of the rookies while the manager watches hours of footage of an empty but brilliantly illuminated parking lot. Then he gets to the footage around the station. Screams come from the office. We barge in and he's stamping on the camera. Hard drives, gibbering things I can't even understand. Along the lines of, "Told me it was clean and safe. No recent activity. Bullshit. Here. I'm not going to do it." He barks at us to leave. Later he makes a call. Rookie goes up to the door and listens in. The rookie comes back reporting. Yeah, he's demanding a transfer. Says they lied to him. Something about them not doing their jobs properly. He's not prepared or equipped here. Then I just heard the phone click and some sobbing. Hours later, my manager exits the office. His shoulders are slumped, defeated. We cut our hours even further, practically opening on weekends only. We'll have a full staff ready those days, but a skeleton crew the rest of the time. Campers are required to check in on one of the closest sites. No campsite, and they're told to leave. You're not authorized to leave the station after dark under any circumstances. In an emergency, do not call 911. Call the number and do exactly what they say. We draw straws for who gets overnight shifts. Why we need to stay overnight if we can't do anything is beyond me. I asked the manager about it, and he said that the standard protocol is to have someone on hand to report anything weird overnight. I have to work my overnight shift. I keep my phone close, the number dialed in, ready if I need to call. It is a bad night. I just wind up pacing around with my shotgun, glancing into the bright floodlights, trying to see what's past them. I hear crickets, and it relaxes me. Prey is quiet when predators are around. It is a long night. The next night, my manager draws the short straw. He seems resigned. In the end, we all have to take a turn. He brings the brightest damn tactical flashlight I've ever seen. He said he bought it just because he's afraid of the dark. He isn't really. He's afraid of the things in the dark. I get a phone call at 3 a.m. It's him. Get over here now and bring guns. What? You have a damn arsenal. Now. I swear, man. I messed up. Oh man, I think they're attracted to the light. I called that number and all they said was backup would be here in the morning. Oh shit, man. I hear the piercing sound of gunshots. A pause. More gunshots. Screaming, scuffling. The line goes dead. I call the number. A new voice answers. Look, I work at blank park. I just got off the phone with blank. I just spoke with blank. What can you report? Something bad happened. It's serious. I heard gunshots. We will have backup there as soon as possible. Did he say anything else? Yeah, he said they were attracted to the light. Doesn't make sense to me. Interesting. Thank you for your report. The park is now closed. You will be reassigned. Goodbye. Officially, the park was closed to be scheduled for a controlled burn to let the old trees die and make room for the new ones. There was nothing in the official report about what happened to the manager on duty. The public understanding was bureaucracies need to be shaken up on occasion. Nobody asked any more questions. I get transferred to a new park, halfway across the country. Change of scenery, and it's beautiful. They've got some odd rules here too. Don't go far after dark. Don't carry a flashlight. I'm concerned about why. Why can't you use a flashlight at night when you need one? They won't tell me. Be safe, everyone. It was late October, kind of cold where the air feels sharp in your lungs, when the sheriff's office called the ranger station. I was the only one on duty that night. The dispatcher's voice came through flat and urgent, the kind of tone you don't ignore. Be advised, we have reason to believe an escaped convict may be in your sector. Male, late 30s, serving time for armed robbery and aggravated assault. Last seen moving north along the highway corridor 2 nights ago. Could be using the park to lay low. I wrote the details down automatically, but my stomach turned. A guy like that isn't just hiding, he's surviving. The park was practically empty by then. Summer tourists were gone, campers cleared out with the first frost. That left me and too much ground to cover. Headquarters sent over a flyer with his mugshot. Pale eyes, rough beard. That look people get after too many years behind fences. I pinned it to the corkboard by the comms desk and tried to forget about it. For a couple of days, nothing. Routine trail treks, clearing downed limbs, radioing hourly. Then I started noticing things. At first it was small. A food wrapper in the brush near my cabin. Not hiker trash, but torn open in a hurry, smeared with peanut butter. Then boot prints in the mud down by the service road. Big ones, wide stride, headed toward my cabin. I told myself it was hunters cutting through, maybe some drifter. But the next night I found cigarette butts under the pine stand 30 yards from my porch. Fresh. The tobacco smell still clung in the air. And then there was the noise. I woke at 2:40 a.m. to the sound of gravel crunching outside. Not an animal. Too heavy. I grabbed my flashlight, thumbed the safety off my sidearm, and swept the beam through the window. Nothing but silver light across frost. My heart pounded anyway. Morning made it worse. I walked the perimeter and just behind the cabin, where the tree line thickens, I found a tarp strung low between 2 trees. Underneath, a sleeping bag, a knife stuck into the dirt, and a stack of empty cans. Beans, chili, tuna. My supplies. He'd been raiding my storage. I called it in. Sheriff said backup would be en route as soon as possible, but the county was stretched thin, an hour away at best. Till then, I was alone. That night I stayed awake, shotgun across my lap, lights off so I could see the windows clearly. Midnight passed. 1 a.m., nothing. Then closer to 3, the crunch again. Slow steps circling. I held my breath and waited. The steps stopped right beneath the window. And then a voice. Low, rough, barely more than a whisper. You in there, Ranger? My mouth went dry. Don't need trouble, just need your truck. I gripped the shotgun tighter. If he broke the glass, I'd have to shoot. If he got the truck, I'd be stranded. Silence stretched, and then the footsteps retreated into the trees. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I found the window smudged with fingerprints. On the porch rail, a note scratched into wood with the tip of my own hatchet. Could have come in last night. Didn't. Think about that. By the time backup arrived, the camp behind the cabin was gone. Just pine needles, ash from a small fire, and that knife still buried in the dirt. They swept the area for hours. Nothing. The fugitive vanished. Weeks later, after I'd been reassigned downstate, I unpacked a duffel bag and found something wedged inside that I hadn't put there. A cigarette butt. Same brand as the ones I'd found by the cabin. I don't know when he slipped close enough to drop it in my gear. Maybe while I was sleeping. Maybe while I was outside. checking the perimeter with a light too bright to see the shadows behind me. I still wake at 2:40 a.m. sometimes, listening for gravel underfoot. "25. That is the number of people who have gone missing at the park since the beginning of the year, with nothing being done or said about it. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'll lose my job when they find this posting, but I have other things to be scared of at this point, and this needs to get out. I'm a wilderness ranger at Mount Rainier. My job is to walk hundreds of miles of trail and wilderness in the park, looking for problems and helping lost and injured hikers. In the old days, any lost hiker would mean all of us going out together, putting together a search plan and doing our best to get them home safely. Things are different today, ever since the start of 2022. Whenever a person gets reported as missing, the family is assured we are on it and will do our best to find them, and promise that they will dispatch us to look. As soon as the family is gone, our bosses tell us that they'll have a search and rescue company take over. And if we know what's best for our jobs, we should just focus on checking trail conditions and doing the rest of our jobs. And so it's gone on since 2022. At first, there were just a few people missing here and there all over the park. It didn't seem that unusual, other than rangers not being involved in the search, but we figured it was some new policy and shrugged it off. More people started disappearing as the year went on, making all of us wonder what was going on and why it had been made clear to us we should keep our mouth shut. Personally, I figured it was just a combination of bad trail conditions from a rough winter and an influx of inexperienced hikers, and the Park Service trying to avoid looking bad when we needed more funding. Until last Thursday. It was an overcast day and I was walking along the trail up to Ipsut Pass in the Carbon River area, humming quietly to myself to pass the time and wondering how far up I would go before I had to put on crampons, when I saw it. Off to the side of the trail, maybe 50 feet into the forest, there was an odd light on the forest floor. At first, I thought the light was just a reflection off of water or some trash somebody had left. But as I moved closer, the light didn't fade or change. It just stayed steady. Maybe it was a lost flashlight. I had walked this trail dozens of times and never noticed it before. I knelt down, taking my pack off, and saw that the light seemed to be coming from just under the dirt. For some reason, I felt uneasy. I looked around to see if anyone else was nearby on the trail, and I saw no one. Shrugging, I reached into the dirt to poke at the light and see what it was. Poking around, I found the corner of a slightly open trapdoor that was at most only a foot wide on each side. It was camouflaged nearly perfectly. If it had not been left just barely ajar with the light exposed, there is no way anyone would have seen it from the trail. I kept opening it, feeling uneasy, but hoping it was some sort of buried seismometer or, at worst, maybe some hiker's idea of a good place to cache food and water for a long trek. Instead, I found the opening to what appeared to be a small burrow of sorts, with an electric camping torch at the corner. I shoved my head down to look inside. The space was small, with enough room for one person if they didn't mind contorting themselves. On the walls of the burrow were dozens of Polaroid photos of people hiking. All the photos seemed to have been taken very low to the ground. The photos were from all over the park, many dozens or more miles apart. Most of the photos I didn't recognize, but among them I saw a few that I knew for a fact were hikers that had gone missing over the last year. Then my heart stopped. I saw a photo of me hiking along the Ipsut Pass trail about half an hour ago. Then I heard a crack. I heard a twig snap somewhere around me. I took my head out of the burrow and started running down the trail the way I came. I didn't look back or stop until I got to the wilderness cabin near Ipsut Campground. I locked and barricaded the door and waited until another ranger showed up the next morning, not sleeping a wink. I asked him to walk back along the Ipsut Pass trail with me. He was annoyed that I wouldn't say why, but agreed. We spent an hour looking but couldn't find any sign of the burrow. I asked for some time off right afterwards, and my manager seemed very suspicious and demanded to know why. I made up some excuse about my family and didn't tell him or anyone else what I saw. For some reason, I knew that telling them would at best end with me losing my job. I don't know who or what made that burrow, but I think it's taking people at Rainier, and for some reason the government is covering it up. I wish that was the end of the story, but it's not. This afternoon, I saw something glinting from within the air vent on the floor of my kitchen. I thought maybe my cat had stuck another toy in it. I took the grating off of the vent to take the toy out. Instead of a cat toy, I found a Polaroid photo, taking low to the ground, of me making breakfast this morning. Hi there, I'm Sam, and I was a park ranger for 6 years. I won't specify where, as I don't want to get in trouble. One of the people I worked with told me to read the other park ranger stories on here, so I thought I'd give it a shot. And shit, is it good to see someone being honest? It inspired me to share some of my own stories. People need to know what happens in these woods. I quit my job a couple of years ago. I couldn't deal with having to bottle up all the things I've seen. Nobody wants to talk about them, but I feel like I'm drowning in the memories of it all. So I'm going to share them. I don't know if I'll be able to share it all. It might be too hard, but I'll give it a go. I hope this raises some awareness of the true danger of the woods and makes people consider their safety. I don't want people to think I'm copying someone or making these things up. I'm just sharing my stories and experiences, so let's get into it. This was my first ever weird experience as a junior ranger. To this day, I still don't know what I saw, but I know it wasn't friendly. I had just received a call about screams coming from deeper into the forest, off one of the more popular trails. This really wasn't unusual. If you've heard a mountain lion, you know it sounds like a woman screaming. So, just as I was about to set off, my chief at the time asked to come along. I found this a little odd as the job seemed a bit too insignificant for his rank, but I brushed it off as I was new and thought maybe he wanted to check my progress. We set off making small talk, and I was obviously trying to suck up a little. We were joking around, and he made a quick remark and said something about making sure that I take even these small jobs seriously because you'll never know what you'll find, and that was some of the most valuable advice I've ever gotten from someone on this job because I learned my lesson from not listening to it. But that's a different story. We get to the area where the call was and begin north of the trail where the noise had been heard. We hear the screams, and it sounds like a mountain lion, but something sounds really off about it. But we keep walking towards it. We're about 10 minutes into the walking towards the sound when all of a sudden it's like all the sound had been sucked from the woods. It was dead silent. Couldn't even hear my breathing. I thought maybe I'd gone deaf, but I looked at my chief and he had the same nervous expression on his face as I did. But by the way he was reacting, I felt as if he had dealt with something similar before, which I now know to be true. Just as the silence came, I started to hear this low buzzing. But it wasn't just buzzing. I could feel the vibration of it in my whole body. So much so that my ears and jaw started to hurt. I can only describe it as if you were getting your teeth drilled in at the dentist, but it felt even worse. Even my vision started to vibrate. As that happened, I swear I saw this black figure, about 7 feet tall, step out from a few trees in front of me and start with that same scream as it bent down and began to crawl towards us. As anyone would, I freaked the heck out and stepped back to start running. My chief grabs my arm very hard just as I start to sprint, almost knocking me over. He puts his other arm around me and holds my arms very tight as he begins to walk me out of the forest. Just as I'm about to put up a fight and tell him to run, he says in a very calm voice, "Don't run, don't talk, don't look back, just keep walking." And I did exactly what he said. He knew something I didn't, and as much as I wanted to run, I didn't want to test the theory of death. That 10-minute walk was excruciating because I knew it was crawling behind us by the buzzing in the back of my head and the sound of its light wailing. I wanted to run so bad. Eventually, I think it ran off because all the noise in the forest came back and the buzzing stopped. We get back on the trail and I'm shaking. I was in so much shock I couldn't even cry. He lets go of me and begins walking back to the main base without acknowledging what happened. I start going crazy and screaming at him, asking what the hell that was, and he says, and yes, I remember word for word what he said. "There are things in these woods that have been here longer than us that we can't explain or get rid of. If you don't think you can handle that, you should pack your bags now." He kept walking and I walked a bit behind, trying to shake that horrible feeling and trying to find a reasonable answer for what just happened. I clearly stayed in the job. When it was good, it was really good. I met some amazing people and I love nature, but in the end, the bad experiences outweighed the good and I had to leave. I wish I would have left when he told me to pack my bags, in all honesty. I know this experience doesn't sound all that scary, but trust me, there are worse ones. Living through it was definitely much scarier than reading it in words. Clearly, the first encounter wasn't enough to scare me off, but the ones to come led to my departure from this job. Some experiences are scarier, but some are more explainable. I'm still debating whether to share the rest of my stories. Maybe I'll see how I feel after posting this. I'd love to hear other people's experiences with the woods. I'm not usually the type to post stories online, but this one has been sitting with me for years and I've never been able to make sense of it. I worked as a seasonal ranger at Shenandoah in Virginia for a few years. Mostly boring stuff. Clearing blowdowns after the storms, closing trails when bears get too active, and answering the same 10 questions at the visitor center. Every once in a while, though, something stuck. This was late October, the year after I started. The park slows way down once the leaves are gone. Campgrounds close, services shut down, and most people stay out until spring. That afternoon I was running checks on Loft Mountain, making sure nobody had slipped the barricades to camp for free. It was around 5 p.m., already dim under the canopy. That's when I saw smoke. Thin and gray, rising steadily through the trees. Not a brush pile or a chimney, it was campfire smoke, and it was coming from inside the closed loop. I parked the truck at the service gate and walked in. It felt wrong immediately. Too quiet. No cars in the lot, no sounds of people. Just that smell of wood smoke. When I rounded the bend to Site 119, I froze. The fire pit was blazing. Not embers, not a leftover coal bed, but a proper fire with fresh logs. A cast iron skillet was on the grate with beans bubbling in it. 2 folding chairs sat pulled up close. On the picnic table, a lantern was on. A cooler sat half open. A bag of hot dog buns had 2 missing, and 2 tin mugs were there, one of them still steaming. But the place was empty. No packs. No jackets tossed over the chairs. No car in the spur. Just an active campsite, like somebody had walked away seconds before I arrived. I stood there for a solid minute, waiting for somebody to come back. Nobody did. I doused the fire first. Standard procedure. Fire risk comes before questions. The skillet was still hot enough to sting when I moved it. The chairs radiated warmth. Whoever had been there hadn't been gone long. I radioed dispatch to confirm if anyone had a permit. Negative. The campground had been closed for weeks. They checked the kiosk logs too. The last recorded use of Site 119 was last September. I did a perimeter sweep. No tire tracks besides the county plow from closure. No footprints in the leaf litter besides mine. No sign of a quick exit. No dropped clothing. No trash. No trail leading off into the woods. The more I looked, the stranger it got. The cooler had eggs, lunch meat, and bottled water. Fresh. The buns were soft. The coffee in the mug fogged when I stirred it with my finger. It wasn't abandoned junk. This was somebody's real campsite. Lived in, but with the people missing. By then, the sun had dropped low. I waited a little longer, thinking maybe they'd pop out of the trees, but the site stayed empty. Eventually, I bagged a few things for evidence. The buns, some scraps from the skillet, and 1 mug, and photographed the rest. When a county deputy met me at the gate an hour later, I brought him in. He asked the same thing I'd asked myself. Where are the people? Where's the car? Why leave a fire like that? We taped the site and left it overnight. The next morning, we checked trailheads up and down Skyline Drive. No abandoned vehicles. Deputies checked county roads. Nothing. No missing persons report matched. For 3 days, we monitored Site 119. Nobody came back. Then a week later came the part that still keeps me up. Hunters in Madison County, maybe 10 miles off park, found scorched camping gear and a cleaning near their forest edge. The sheriff's office called us because they recognized the cooler and the tent brand from our photos. The hunters had smelled it before they saw it. Plastic, nylon, accelerant. What they found wasn't a brush burn. The fire had been too hot, too fast. A cooler lid melted flat, scraps of tent fabric fused into the dirt, and a twisted metal frame of a camp stove. It looked less like trash disposal and more like somebody wanted everything destroyed. We collected what we could, but it was barely anything. Whatever was burned out there had meant to have been disappeared. No bodies, no bones, just melted gear that matched the brand and style from Site 119. The case went nowhere. No hikers were reported missing and no families called in. Nothing ever connected. On paper, it got filed as unconfirmed squatting, possible arson. Off the record, none of us bought that. The food had been fresh, the fire still burning and the coffee steaming. Somebody had been there hours before I walked in. Somebody who either vanished willingly or was taken. I've thought about it more than I want to admit. Best case, it was a couple of trespassers who bolted when they saw my truck. They came back later, packed up, and decided to burn their gear off park to avoid getting caught. It's a dumb theory, but at least it keeps it human. Other options don't sit right. There's no way you leave food hot on the stove, mugs steaming, a fire blazing, and just wander off. Not unless you don't get the choice. And burning everything later? That feels deliberate, like somebody wanted to erase the fact those people had been there at all. Every time I patrol Loft in the off-season, I glance towards that site. It looks normal. Just another fire ring, picnic table, and lantern post. Nothing left. But in my head, I still see the fire, smell the beans, and watch that coffee steaming in the mug with nobody around to drink it. If there's a takeaway for me, it's this. When you find a fire burning with no one around, treat it like a crime scene. Don't assume someone just walked away. Sometimes they don't walk anywhere. Sometimes they're gone before they even get the chance. This event took place in an area of the co.ag National Forest in Louisiana in spring of 2010. I and 4 other friends, all males 19 to 21 years of age, decided to go camping a few weeks before the semester ended. We looked online and discovered Louisiana's National Forest, co.ag, was a great place to go camping. Score. We drive for about half an hour to find a spot. Ultimately, we parked along the side of the road and walked down to the woods about 1/8 of a mile. Maybe even shorter than that, actually. A fire was lit, and soon all of us were playing music, smoking, and having a good bit of whiskey. Nobody was wasted, but 2 of my friends did take it easy with the smoking and whiskey and were sober, or close enough to it when we headed in for the night. We woke up within minutes of each other the next morning. It's hard to get around a tent without waking the others up. That's when I noticed the 2 guys who didn't smoke or drink much were looking worried. I asked them what was up, and they told us something happened last night. My 2 friends heard some noise outside the tent and woke up to investigate. As they pulled a zipper down the front flap, they saw 2 guys with flashlights close to the tent. One of the men asked, "How many of you are in the tent?" My friend told him 6 or 7 guys were in the tent. While telling the story, he said he wasn't sure where that lie came from, but he just stuck with it. The 2 men lowered their lights, said they were park rangers, and simply stated that we couldn't camp in the area, but just to move our site when the morning comes. They then left. To prevent us from getting in trouble and future rangers from searching us and finding pot, we decided to pack up and go to a ranger station and ask which areas we could camp in. The station wasn't too far, and we talked with the rangers for a while. We explained what happened and said we weren't far at all. One of them looked a bit confused. "Could you show me on this map where you boys were camping last night?" We quickly point out a spot close to the road we came from. She walks away to her computer for a minute or 2 to check on something, then comes back to talk to us. "You boys were free to camp there. We have no zones even close to that road where you couldn't camp. Also, I just checked all of our call-ins. No rangers reported anything from that area of the woods last night." My friend who originally told us what happened started to look a little pale. Now that I think of it, those 2 guys weren't wearing uniforms. It was just black t-shirts and pants. We left for home shortly after.